All right, so what you are looking at here is the beginnings of my new workshop. I recently moved my shop from a makerspace back into my garage so that I could have more personal space and leave projects unfinished, I suppose you could say. So one of the things that I needed to do as part of setting up this garage was to put a dust collector and a compressor somewhere, and I didn't want them in the garage because they would make a lot of noise. So if you look at the top of the video, you'll see a little metal pipe above the thermostat, and that is where the dust collector is coming in. So what I'm doing now is routing out and preparing the joinery for these joist supports. And these two pieces are going to hold joists, which are going to hold a piece of plywood, which is going to hold the dust collector and the compressor under a little shed roof outside the shop. So it was kind of a project designed more for practice than out of strict necessity. And my friend was available to help me out, so I figured I'd teach him some stuff about timber framing and we could work together and make a cool little 1-week build. These pieces took a lot longer than I thought they would, but it was really fun because I got up really early and then just started crushing out joinery. So the basic layout is 2 joist supports, 2 posts, and then the posts support a sort of 1 purlin that connect a bunch of rafters, which you can see I'm cutting now. The rafters extend from a ridge beam, more or less, that's bolted to the outside of the garage, and then are supported by the posts. So the attempt at end grain planing these pine boards did not go super well, and I was not feeling ready to spend all the time getting those cleaned up when sanding would suffice. So there you can see the posts. There is a large panel that sits between the posts, and so I'm routing the groove for that panel. And then there's a groove on the bottom that the boards sit in as well, so that they cover up the dust collector and compressor from the house. Now I'm doing a little final cleanup work, chamfering the ends, test fitting. And here I am finishing up the last joist. There are 3 joists, and I had my friend cut the other 2, but we were running out of time, so I just had to jump in there and cut this last one. It looks a lot easier in sped up motion than it was in real life. Just cleaning up these, and we're marking the ends of the posts, cleaning the shop a little bit, getting ready for planing, and cutting the ends. These are going to sit on top of bolts that are embedded in the concrete. I wanted to get a final height check. All right. I think I spilled a cup of water or something at that point. All right, so now I'm cutting the ridge beam and the purlins. There's an angled cut on them, and once I got it roughed out, I planed the sides to fit, and you can see the shop just getting dustier and dustier as I use the big Makita planer. And once the rafter lines were laid out, I cut 2 notches that fit on top of the posts, marked and drilled holes that the ridge beam is going to get attached, and then did a little final planing. And sanded these because I guess I was just not in the mood to plane them by hand. This is the next morning, and I'm using the roof supports as a planing bench. I was pretty surprised that this old growth, well, I guess it wouldn't be called old growth, but it was pretty tight-grained Douglas fir from Home Depot. I had to pick through the pile to get sort of quarter sawn, straight-grained pieces. And I was pretty impressed. There was not too much tear out. I really sharpened up my blade and tuned it up, and decent finish on most of the posts. So here we are preparing the site. Now it makes a little more sense what exactly we're trying to achieve. I'm laying out the ridge beam support here. Those two 2x4s are going to support it. And you can see the metal ductwork where the dust collector is going to enter, and there's those two stray plugs where the wiring is going to go into the shed. All right, so now we're going to be drilling holes into the cement. Put some liquid nails on there, and now we're actually bolting it down. So a lot of concrete anchors. That is not going anywhere. And I had to add an extra hole because this garage is like a strange brick concrete amalgamation, so not all of the bolts bit tightly. And then once the bolts were in, I put little oak caps on top of each bolt hole to cover them up. And now we are putting together the parts of the frame. This was a little tricky, and I had to do a little fine tuning to get everything to fit just right. I would not have liked to rush this as much as we had, but they basically had a week to do this. Now we're drilling holes in the ground. And putting in the threaded rod now. Lining everything up. And we'll bolt it to the wall. You can see where the power enters the garage. Something that's been tricky this whole time, which was a little clearance roof. And you'll see that becomes a bit of a nuisance later on once we do the actual roofing. All right, now that the frame is in, we made and put in the paneling, which was capped off by the rafter support. And there was a little blowout on this one, so we had to glue that back together. And then the rafter support captures those panels in, and they just float there. Putting in all the rafters. And we're test fitting the battens that are going to hold the panels together and provide a nice aesthetic. And working right into the evening. And I think the last thing we did this night was screw in all the battens from behind, which makes sort of a sort of monolithic panel that floats in the grooves in the posts and joist support below. So that was the framing day. And I think after this we really hit it hard on the sake. So next day, or this might be 2 days later because I had a trip to go to. So I fixed the peg issue, starting fresh, getting everything ready for roofing. And the first thing I'm going to do is put the floor down and fit that in so that I could stand on it and put some stuff in it. Nothing super exciting happening right now. There goes the floor. And little wave to the camera. So I got my friend started on cleaning up the dust collector, which I still haven't refinished just yet while I was working on the trim. The roof is trimmed with the same material as the rafters, which is finished 2x2s. There is one gap that sits in the center of the front of the roof, and this front piece actually has a 1/4-inch groove routed into it so that the first piece of tongue and groove slips into that groove. And so when you look up underneath the rafters, there's no seam and it looks really elegant. So you don't see any seams or breaks in the tongue and groove from below. All the seams are over the rafters, and the first tongue goes into the bottom piece of roof trim. Again, when I cut the 45 degrees on the roof trim, I cut it a little small of an angle so that the corners met first. And now I'm framing in the little mini roof, which is composed of a small rafter that goes into a small support and then 2 shallower rafters. And those are all screwed together and then pegged with small oak pegs. I was trying to avoid having screws on this visible, but the pegs kind of hide it. It really was amazing that it took quite a long time this day to get all the rafters and trim in. It's kind of that 80-20 principle. We get the bulk of the structure in quickly, and then everything else starts to take a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. There, the trim is finally in. And now we are ready to start tongue and grooving. And this pretty much proceeded with no problems. It was just cut a piece, fit it in, nail it down. The problem happened as we got towards the end because we had just 1 row short of tongue and groove, which was really disappointing because it interrupted our flow. And when we went to Home Depot to get it, they were dragging. I mean, there was a guy at the checkout counter that just took like 30 minutes. I don't know what he was doing. He was signing up for a credit card or something. But we got the wood and we finished it. So it took a little time fitting in the tongue and groove in an elegant way around that mini roof. But now you have a beautiful underside of the roof there. Now we're cleaning up and off to the store. All right, now we come back and we are back at it with the final piece of tongue and groove. Now, I'm not sure if we continued working much that night. Yeah, I guess we were cutting the sheathing after that. So on top of the tongue and groove is a 3/4 inch piece of plywood screwed down to the rafters, and then more plywood fitted around that mini roof. This was up and down constantly. My legs were killing me after this. Up the ladder, down the ladder, up the ladder, down the ladder. Fit. In the video, it looks so much flatter than it actually was, but it was steep and a little scary up there. I did not want to fall off. So that dust cloud was me cutting a groove into the cement that so I had a keyway to seal in the final piece of flashing. Here I'm putting on drip edge and making sure that it overlaps in the right way so that any water that comes to the end just drips right off. Now here's a piece of protector wrap, which is probably unnecessary, but I wanted to seal the drip edge to the wood. So then I think the next layer is tar paper, stapled down and overlapped, cut around, and I sealed that down with some Tyvek tape. Also probably unnecessary, but again, I wanted to make sure this was as waterproof as possible. And we were starting to run out of steam here. I think this was Saturday night, and I was just getting a little worried that at 10 o'clock making a lot of noise with the nail gun. All right, final day of roofing. So it was definitely time for us to stop the night before. Things were just dragging. But then it started drizzling the next day, which was what I was trying to avoid by finishing the roof the night before. But sometimes you just got to work in the rain. So we're putting down 3 layers of starter shingles. And then about a 6-inch exposure. And then we snap the line and just repeat. The nail gun really makes this go quickly. I used the same shingles when I built the Ford Flophouse, which was a truck camper that looked like a little cottage. And you can get a really good system going where you have one person sorting the shingles into different sizes. And then you sort of have those distributed across the roof, and you're picking from them what fits and what looks good and what covers the seams. I mean, it's really important that each shingle covers the seam and the nails on the shingle below it. That way any water that drips off the wood will fall on more wood. Now, here I'm up there with a little bit of safety protection. And once we get to the top of the roof, we have to start using half shingles. And then even smaller pieces than that. That little mini roof was such a pain. I had to cut little pieces of flashing and small shingles and shingles to fit. But, you know, you kind of got to deal with the building you have. Any new construction is going to be, everything's going to be somewhat square. Whereas retrofitting is always going to have strange situations you have to deal with. And final set of shingles going in there. Waiting for them to be cut. Fitting in everything. And now the day starts to fade away. And the last thing I do is put a piece of flashing all the way across the top. Oh, I guess I'm fitting the shingles and the flashing and sealant in the mini roof. This is such a pain. I would prefer not to do this again. And you can see by the time changing how long it took. Okay, there's the big strip flashing nailed down to the top, and that's keyed into that groove I cut earlier, and then a piece roof sealant, and a little small piece of flashing at the end. That's all sealed up. And that's it. The roof is on, and this little project is done. So soon I'll have a dust collector in there and be on my way.